All right, we are now live. I'd like to call to order our Urban Renewal Authority meeting and would like to welcome everybody here that's on the board and ask for a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dennehy,
Here.
Commissioner Gonzalez, absent. Commissioner Jaquez.
Here.
Commissioner Hamrick,
Here.
Commissioner Meisner,
Here.
Commissioner Payne,
Here.
Commissioner Reed, absent. Commissioner Reeser,
Here.
Commissioner A. Smith,
Here.
Commissioner B.
Not used to
Smith,
ace.
Here.
Commissioner Tomar.
All right, thank you. We now have our consent agenda that needs approval and our minutes that need approval. I'll turn that time over to Ryan.
Yeah, the consent agenda is just the approval of minutes for the Urban Renewal Authority meeting on December 9th.
Council or Commissioner Meisner.
Am I the only one that didn't get minutes? No,
They were sent in email form from Cindy.
Thank you.
okay.
I'd like to take a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes for the Urban Renewal Authority meeting on December 9th, 2020.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? I'll call for a vote, please.
Commissioner Dennehy,
Aye.
Commissioner Jaquez.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamrick,
Aye.
Commissioner Meisner,
No, because I haven't read them.
Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Reeser,
Aye.
Commissioner A. Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner B. Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Tomar.
Thank you for passing that. We now would like to open up the nominations for the chairman of the URA. I have been serving as a chairman, but now according to minutes, we will vote for who will be the chairman. Council or Commissioner Meisner.
2 questions. Is that a secret ballot or an open ballot? Which I don't care, but
Yeah,
then,
Catherine,
But you know,
Be an open ballot.
an open ballot.
all right, puts us all on the spot. Then my second motion would be, with all due respect to council, trying to think out of the box. I feel like that the chair, in my opinion, would best be served by a non-council member, and I would nominate Tim Payne.
There's been a nomination for Tim Payne.
Absolutely.
Can I third that?
Are there any other nominations? Then I will close. Well, if there's only one nomination, I'm going to request approval by acclamation. And we'll go ahead and, well, let's start with some discussion. Is there any discussion on the matter?
Well, it's not like you didn't have nothing to do now.
Do you have something to say? I mean, if you're only allowed to be on 3 boards, you might as well be the chairman of it.
might as well. I would accept it. Okay, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I would accept the nomination.
Do we get to protest?
Let's go ahead and call a vote.
Commissioner Dennehy,
Aye.
Commissioner Jaquez.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamrick,
Aye.
Commissioner Meisner,
Yes.
Commissioner Payne,
Aye.
Commissioner Reeser,
Aye.
Commissioner A. Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner B. Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Tomar.
Aye. I just got told how to use this.
All right, so we now have a new head of the board. Do we automatically turn that time over to the chairman? We're going to stay in our chairs just because of,
Not going to switch seats tonight. That's fine.
do you have an agenda, written out agenda?
I got an agenda. Yeah.
Well, this is
Oh,
one for the discussion.
Okay.
What's up next is the selection of a secretary.
Does he need that? Oh, she gave him. anymore.
No,
What did you
no,
have?
we don't have the selection of the secretary. It's time to move on to item B. And that's a Hotel St. Cloud presentation.
Okay, so we got done with the selection of chairman. Per our bylaws, we're also supposed to select vice chair and other officers. It's not on the agenda, but that's according to our bylaws. And so going by our bylaws, I'm going to open the nominations for a vice chair.
Who's that? John's one?
I would like to nominate Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick for vice chair.
He's not there. Pro Tem. He's a
Oh, Commissioner Hamrick.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll close that. Have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dennehy,
Yes.
Commissioner Jaquez.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Meisner,
Yes.
Commissioner Reeser,
Aye.
Commissioner A. Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner B. Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Tomar,
Yes.
Chairman Payne.
Aye. Okay, got that. Congratulations, sir. We also have treasurer that has to be nominated. So I'll take nominations for treasurer according to our bylaws.
No. Is Ryan on the board?
How about this? Does anybody want to be the treasurer?
Brandon? He's a money man.
He knows.
Everybody's crawling underneath. their
Oh, I
table.
know somebody who has financial experience.
There you go, right there.
Okay, do we have a nomination for Mrs. Reeser?
I nominate Commissioner Reeser as treasurer.
I
Okay.
second.
It's been moved and seconded. I think it's probably safe to say we will close nominations. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Dennehy,
Yes.
Commissioner Jaquez. Commissioner Hamrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Meisner,
Yes.
Commissioner Reeser,
Yes.
Commissioner A. Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner B. Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Tomar,
Aye.
Chairman Payne.
Aye. Okay, now we'll move on to item B, Hotel St. Cloud presentation with Bill Cunningham and Ann Riker.
So tonight we have our consultants, Bill Cunningham, and don't know that Ann is on the Zoom. But we also have Stan Bullis and Kurt Goss from Unbridled who will be joining us as well. This is the analysis for the gap analysis that we had requested to be done. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to go through this presentation.
Very good. Thank you, Ryan. And thank all of you around your computer tonight.
Is your mic on?
See a green light?
Just pull it a little bit closer.
There we go. Okay. Much better. Just to give you a little bit of background, as you know, our firm helped you guys form the authority, did the urban renewal plan, the condition survey, and the county impact reports for your urban renewal area. A very common extension of our services is helping URAs evaluate projects that come forward and ask for tax increment financing incentives. So this is a process that we've been through with several URAs in the state, and that probably the common element within all of those is we're looking at what we consider to be, or what we all consider to be, a catalyst project for investment. And when we say a catalyst project, we mean that investment in that particular project not only helps the project itself, but it can create that ripple effect throughout the redevelopment area. It can be that first stone that you throw in the water that creates the ripple effect. So in the case of St. Cloud Hotel, obviously this is a historic building in a key location in downtown. It's what we would consider to be an iconic project for downtown. So, we were thrilled as consultants to your authority that this was one of the first projects to come forward and look for some redevelopment assistance. Oh, doesn't look like my, oh.
Here comes that.
I guess the one else. Thank you. Okay. So our assignment objectives, as we talk to Ryan and Rick, and again, these are pretty common to these kinds of projects that we work on. It's really reviewing all of the materials that the developer has submitted to the authority. Their assumptions regarding revenues, expenses, showing us their plans, what is the project going to look like. We identify as we say, under identifying project expenses, which really contribute to the economic gap. And a couple of slides later, we'll talk about what some of the challenges are, what some of the common challenges are for a redevelopment project like this. The most important probably part of our work is this last bullet point, and that is quantifying the economic gap resulting from projected revenues, projected expenses, and whatever the timing of the project might be. In other words, how long does it take the project to reach some level of stabilization? Then we also take that further and estimate the amount of tax increment that can be generated by the project over time. And that really speaks to the level of the incentive or the potential incentive that that particular project can apply for. As I said, some of the redevelopment truths or some of the things that we virtually find in every redevelopment project, particularly in a downtown area or a redeveloping downtown or a revitalizing downtown, redevelopments are at a competitive disadvantage. It's not a level playing field for a developer to come in and try to redevelop in an existing area that is probably in some form of revitalization. It's much easier to essentially go out on the fringe of your community on a greenfield site and develop there. It's less costly, it takes less time, and it's a generally easier project. So whenever we look at a downtown or a redevelopment area, an urban infill area, we know that there's going to be some economic challenges. And so the idea is, how can we, as the public sector, step in and help bridge that gap or level that playing field, okay? Public and private sectors have to share costs and responsibilities for revitalization. You guys have already made an investment in this redevelopment effort, this area that you're calling your urban renewal area. You've already gone through the process of forming your authority, doing the plan, approving the plan. What we can tell you unequivocally that private investment will follow public investment. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with this project. Once the public sector shines a light on a particular area and starts to make active investments in that area, that's when the private sector usually steps up, because they see that the city has made this area a priority. The other thing that's, as we say, a redevelopment truth is that more private investment will follow initial private investment. We always tell our urban renewal clients that if you have to incentivize the first project within your redevelopment area, that should, as I said earlier, create that ripple effect, that economic ripple effect and bring more private investment. And if urban renewal operates in the right way, you shouldn't have to keep incenting projects that come after. You know, at some point, that first project kind of proves up the market and says, this is a good place to invest, and other private sector developers will follow. And again, I think you're probably seeing some of that now. There have been other property owners who are thinking about reinvesting in your downtown. So more private investment will definitely follow that initial private investment. The public sector role, as we always say, is really to ready the environment for investment. So in addition to perhaps helping or providing some financial assistance to a single project, there are other things that a city can do, making public investments in the public right of way, which you guys have already done in your downtown area. So those are some of the things, making it easier, making the entitlement process a little bit easier for the private sector, or perhaps not as timely as it has been in the past. Those are all things that the city can do to ready the environment for private investment. And then lastly, because the way that we look at it as an objective observer between the public and the private sector is the success really depends on how equal the economic risk and the economic reward is for both the public sector and the private sector. Private sector usually has a much shorter term return expectation. They want to essentially invest and get their return back over, let's say, a 10-year period. For the public sector, there's a much longer term perspective on return. That particular project is going to be in your community forever, or for at least 20 or 30 years. So one of the things that we always like to say is that we really sit between the public and the private sectors and explain the challenges of each to the other, okay? So let's talk specifically about the St. Cloud Hotel. And this is your catalyst project for the downtown area. When the hotel is redeveloped, it will include these components: 36 rooms, a new lobby and lounge area, 2 branded bars as they call it, and this is taken right out of the investment package for the Hotel St. Cloud. First class steakhouse restaurant. So those are kind of at least what the plans are currently. That this would be comparable to a boutique hotel in another downtown area. So that in and of itself typically requires a higher cost of finish, higher construction costs, because it really is attempting to come in kind of at the top of the market. Okay, most boutique hotels would be characterized that way. Now, interestingly, the way the operating structure is laid out, and this frankly makes our job easier to identify which entity is really taking the risk, or what kind of risk are they taking in a private sector redevelopment deal like this. So the operating structure is that there is a Hotel St. Cloud holding company. They are the entity that will develop and own the building and act as a landlord. Okay, much like another commercial property. There will be a hotel management company that will operate the hotel, oversee the restaurant and catering spaces, whatever catering they can do. They will lease space from the holding company. So again, they're going to be a tenant, but at the same time operate their own part of the project. And then the restaurant and catering company will do the same. They will lease space from the holding company, and then they'll operate, their restaurant and their catering service. So in many ways, this is like a retail project where the developer builds the building, acts as the landlord, and then leases space to whatever businesses go in there. And then they, they're responsible obviously for their individual operating. So it's really the holding company is the entity that's coming forward and asking for financial assistance, okay? But obviously their performance or their success is going to depend on the hotel management company and who operates those restaurants, okay? So that, this was a graphic, again, that was in their investment package. And we just thought this was a great graphic way to kind of describe what it is. So we're really, from this point forward, we're really talking about the holding company. They are the applicant for this incentive application. So what we do, in most of these TIF analysis projects or these TIF incentive projects, we're really here to kind of test the assumptions of the developer. We can say again that they've given us a tremendous amount of operating data, construction cost information. We don't often get that level of information from a developer or from an applicant, which in our eyes, I think that kind of speaks to the professionalism of this particular developer. That is not always the case in urban renewal. And I can probably share a couple of horror stories with you at some point when working with other urban renewal areas that don't have the applicant that has the expertise that these guys do. So again, you should feel good about the potential partner that you might be, teaming with on this particular project. So again, development revenues, the hotel lodging, as I said, 36 rooms, we've estimated, they also submitted a market analysis with this, which is kind of unheard of. So again, speaking to their professionalism, estimating about a 3-year stabilization period. And if you think about where the hotel market is today versus last year versus next year, there's probably going to be some lag time in that. And then again, that is one of the market risk associated with a hotel lodging property right now. That rests solely on them. That's the risk that they're taking. That is no risk to the Urban Renewal Authority. Okay, so if we're kind of figuring out how to assign risk in here, they're taking all of that market risk. The restaurant and bar, 1 restaurant and 2 bars, again, we're using the same stabilization period. The lease rates were based on the operations that they estimated or that they projected for both the hotel and then the restaurant bar. We looked at those revenue assumptions and felt like, if anything, they were a little on the high side, which, and again, kind of backing up, when we do these projects for other urban renewal authorities, we oftentimes find that the private sector, which we would probably do that too if it was our project, but they tend to underestimate revenues and overestimate expenses, because that makes their project look better for an incentive. In this case, we feel like they've either pushed the revenues a little higher than average, and if they get there, great. That's upside, but it still is not high enough to not create an economic gap. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So lease rates, as we think, are a little on the high side. Development costs, and again, when we talk about extraordinary expenses, within the urban renewal legislation, there are eligible expenses identified for redevelopment, and expenses that essentially contribute to the blighting conditions that urban renewal is designed to offset or overcome. So if we look at their development costs, really the areas that not only affect their financial feasibility, but we would consider extraordinary is anything related to demolition, where they're having to go in and tear out stuff and haul it out. Environmental remediation, there is asbestos in that building that they've had to abate or will have to abate. Historic preservation, it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's a great funding tool that you can tap into when you historically rehab a building. On the other side of it, though, it does generally cost more to build to the guidelines and the requirements of that historic rehabilitation. So we often find, more often than not, those are extraordinary expenses that apply in a redevelopment project like this. So there are expenses within their cost estimates that we would definitely consider extraordinary. And these are some of the ones that the Colorado Revised Statute, the Urban Renewal Statute, identifies in the legislation. So what we basically have is, in this project, we feel like they're, the revenue estimates are, as I said, perhaps a little high, but again, within a realm of reasonableness. On the cost side, again, within the realm of reasonableness, with the caveat that there are extraordinary expenses that make their costs a little higher. These are some of the other things that affect financial feasibility. Land cost, which in this case wasn't, the cost to acquire that property wasn't a high cost, or one that we would consider a high cost. Again, retrofit versus new construction costs, that absolutely affects financial feasibility. We've already talked about historic preservation. Any parking requirements that they might have to, if they had to provide structured parking, something like that, that has a big cost impact. Discounts on rents and sale prices. Again, this is one where we feel like probably has the biggest impact on financial feasibility in redevelopment projects, particularly downtown projects, because in most cases, the market in those downtowns is not at the level that it is throughout the market. In other words, the suburban market, rents are higher, vacancy rates are lower. In a downtown area that's revitalizing, those rents that people can achieve on their buildings is less than that. And that has a direct economic impact on a pro forma. Any placemaking elements, amenities, connections, public spaces, and then lastly, obviously blight remediation, which that is first and foremost what this project will do. Will eliminate blight on that particular property. So the economic analysis that we do is very simply estimating, based on those assumptions that we talked about earlier, what do we think the project value could be? What value can we create on that particular site through the development of this program? I'll do it on the next page. So based on the proposed development program, the assumptions for revenues that we identified earlier, the rents, the lease rates, all of the income that's going to come into the holding company, we think the value of this project at stabilization would be about 8.8 million. Okay. Now let's go to the cost side. If we compare that to project costs, and again, excuse me, what we've done here is also add a line item which you usually don't see under development costs for developer profit. And the only reason we do that, again, because we're trying to identify an economic gap that perhaps the authority could come in and help assist to cover that. So if the project costs, let's say, $10.5 million to build, a developer is going to have some sort of a reasonable level of profit on top of that in order to essentially be interested in the project, or be willing to invest in the project. So we've included a 10% developer profit, which for a project that has, the risk that this one does, that's probably pretty low. But we at least wanted to account for that and say, okay, that would be a reasonable line item to add to the cost, which brings the cost to about $11.5 million. Then we compare that back to that 8.8 million in value, and we end up with an economic gap of about 2.6 million. Okay. And again, these are all numbers based on pro formas. They'll change over time as they continue to refine their development program, as they continue to refine their costs. But the way that we want our authority clients to look at this is really look at the percentage more than anything. As we say here, 2.6 million, it's about 23% of project costs. If you go down to that last bullet point, economic gaps of 20 to 40% are relatively common in urban redevelopment projects. So in other words, the authority, if you provided some sort of an incentive to these guys, you would be, you wouldn't be a 23% partner, but you'd probably be a 15% partner. And I think that's the way we ask our authority to look at these. We just finished a project over in Silverthorne that ended up being about a 45% gap. That was unusually high, but again, they were, it was a very risky project that they were willing to, the private sector was willing to take on some of that risk, or most of that risk. And the town of Silverthorne, through their urban renewal authority, were willing to, chip in. And again, and it's probably obvious to most people, but it bears repeating, and that is, they only get that incentive if they redevelop the project. That they only generate the level of incentive that they want through their own efforts. Okay, so if they don't build the project, or if they don't finish the redevelopment, if they don't achieve the rents that they've shown here, they won't get as much of that incentive. Okay, so that's, again, just a reminder that that's the case in all of these projects that are coming forward for TIF incentives. Okay, so again, that percentage is probably at the low end of most of the projects that we've worked on in terms of a gap. So they, I believe the incentive that they're asking for is about 1.2 million. So it's well below that economic gap that we've come up with. Okay. So again, in our minds, that's a pretty good deal for the authority. The next step in our process is to estimate what that tax increment generation could be from this redeveloped St. Cloud Hotel. And what we wanted to show you first is after all of the tax sharing agreements have been negotiated and finalized, this is how those tax revenues, those property tax revenues will break out, and how much will the authority get of all of these different mill levies. So if you look at the bottom line of the mill levy, at least for this property, which is about 78.7 mills, the Urban Renewal Authority will get about almost 60% of that. Okay, after all of the sharing with the different taxing districts. Okay, so then we use that 60% in our estimates of what kind of tax increment can we generate from this project over time. Okay, you have a 25-year TIF period, so we've shown a 25-year forecast for those tax increment revenues. You get property tax increment from the St. Cloud Hotel. There will be sales tax increment from the hotel and the lodging piece. There will also be sales tax increment from the restaurant and the bar. So it's a combination of property and sales tax increment that could be generated by this project over that 25-year period. And as we say here, and those 5-year increments are cumulative totals. So let's look at the first 5 years. Almost 400,000 in tax increment will be generated. Over 10 years, it jumps to about 1.3 million. So if their ask for this project is 1.2 million, the development of this project should cover that incentive within 10 years, okay? And again, just to give you some perspective from other projects, I would say the more typical payback period for a project like this would be closer to 15 years, or maybe even as long as 20. Again, this project is one of those that it doesn't have to take a huge incentive to make, to bridge that economic gap. And then it also provides some back-end return to the authority, because once that $1.2 million incentive is paid back, then the remainder of the 25-year period, all of that money flows to the authority. And as we say here, after that 10 years, the URA share of tax increment revenues from this project would total approximately 3.1 million for the remainder of the 25-year TIF period. Does that make sense? Yep. So some of the things that kind of affect and these are things that we've already talked about, but again, the extraordinary cost items really result in a higher than the average development cost. Something close to $400 per square foot versus a more typical $350, $375. Current market rate hotel restaurant program does not cover development costs, nor does it generate a reasonable level of profit. And that's why we put in that 10% line item. The return on investment to the URA, again, property tax increment and sales tax increment, totaling about 3.1 million after that $1.2 million incentive is provided. The other way that we look at projects like this, and again, we always tell our Urban Renewal Authority clients that for every dollar in public investment that they make in a project should return $5 to $10 in private investment. Okay, so then we always calculate, as we call it here, a public investment leverage ratio. So what we're saying here, to leverage the URA contribution, if indeed, that $1.2 million is what you settle on, that is going to generate 8.8 million in new downtown investment, which is the value of the project. And that's about a 7-to-1 ratio. So again, that's almost another report card that we use when we look at redevelopment projects. If they can achieve at least a 5-to-1 public investment leverage ratio, we feel like that's a good investment on the authority's part. Okay. Then lastly, and again, this speaks to the TIF agreement that you may enter into with this particular applicant. These are some of the considerations that we always like to just lay out as things to think about more than anything as you're negotiating those agreements. Capping the amount of the reimbursement, either cap the amount or the number of years, charging an administrative fee most of our urban renewal clients charge a 1 to 1.5% administrative fee to the developer when those TIF revenues come in. In other words, every year when those TIF revenues come in, the authority takes off, the top 1 to 1.5%, and then that can go to administrative costs. Because the legislation requires that an urban renewal authority be an ongoing concern, that it can essentially fund itself. So that's something we always ask our clients to put that in the agreement. Requesting additional project information, periodic review of financial statements. Again, the way we look at it is you will be a partner with this development group. Maybe it's a 20% partner, maybe it's a 15% partner, but you are a partner. So you should, as a partner, have access to all of their information, their pro forma, their operating statements, and that annual review of those financial statements, again, because they're going to be tied to the incentive that you're going to provide. That is an absolute must. It should be an open books policy for the developer to share with the authority. And the good news is that they've already shared a lot of that. So I think there's an expectation going forward that will continue to happen. Payment of fees for attorneys and other consultants to the city or authority. Again, many times our fees or perhaps your attorney's fees associated with a specific agreement can be repaid from TIF revenues. So that's, again, something to think about. Put that responsibility on the applicant for paying some of those administrative fees that you're going to incur. Property ownership status throughout reimbursement period and the non-assignment agreement upon sale without prior authorization. The reason this comes up, and again, it's only to protect the authority. When you enter into a TIF agreement with a developer, you want that developer to either be around for the entire term of the agreement. If it takes 10 years, if it takes 15 years, you want the developer to be there throughout that. If they do sell the property at some point before the incentive has been paid, that incentive goes with the property. It runs with the property. And again, sometimes it seems logical, but we've had to consult that it be in the agreement, that it be written into the agreement. The same thing with an assignment agreement. If they want to assign this particular project management to another entity, it's legally, the authority probably can't require them to make it, or you probably can't require them to let you authorize that, but at least, have that communication that this is coming. And again, that's just, the very best TIF agreements that we've worked on had open communication continually between the authority representatives and the development representatives. That just has to happen. Okay, you don't provide the incentive and then you just go away and let them do whatever. Performance requirements would be the last one, and again, I think those are things that are built into your normal development agreements anyway. But really, when it comes to an urban renewal project, and because it's so important to generate tax increment revenue as quickly as possible, you just want to have some timing requirements in there, that they have to get vertical construction going by a certain time period, that kind of thing. But that, again, should be part of any agreement. And with that, I think we're be happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, John.
Sure. I'll start off here. So on that last bullet point there on performance requirements, why is it important to generate TIF income as quickly as possible?
Well, that's for the private sector, from a private sector standpoint, as I said earlier, they're not going to get their incentive until they generate TIF, until they actually begin construction, so that the assessor can go out and assign value to that. So it's critical in a tax increment deal to get that, get those improvements made as quickly as possible. And for the authority's sake, because you're the one who's going to continue to get tax increment revenues, even if you're sharing some back with the other taxing districts, these TIF deals just don't work if there's an extended period over which, they're not generating any increment. So that's a pretty critical piece of the timeline that has to occur.
Commissioner Hammer, in short, that the clock's ticking, even though it's 25 years, and 25 years seems like a long time. When you're talking about development deals that take years to put in place, you want to get that increment generating as quickly as possible.
Well, and
Ryan, I've got a quick comment too, just in terms of we don't have a development fee, the 10% included in those numbers, and we did that because our intention is to hold the real estate asset and also self-perform the work of the hotel operating company and the restaurant. And so we did that actually just to try to keep the pro forma as clean and as lean as we could, because the macro numbers don't, if you're not holding the investment, it doesn't look very good. So that's just a point of clarification, that there wasn't any developer fee on that. We get our money when the hotel operating company gets their money and pays its rent.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Commissioner Meisner.
Kind of in response to John's question, I'll publicly say this, but there's another huge development in town that's reaching the 4-year period that I seen them bringing in drywall this morning. I mean, I would hope that this organization has better engineers and contractors that are going to get this project going and start creating some TIF revenues. If not, I mean, as an example, with another building, would that organization, is there any TIF, not TIF, but has the tax status of that changed yet? Because of the non-completion of the project?
It should be gradually or incrementally
Slow.
increasing over a year. Yeah.
But they're definitely not generating any revenue from that standpoint. And it can happen. I mean, we don't think, I think generally we don't think those things happen, but there's a perfect example of a large project that is churning in the water.
Mr. Smith.
And Stan, you can speak to this as well, but I know we've had conversations where your intention is the day you get your financing, you want to be constructing immediately, because time is money for you too, and the interest accruing on your loans is pretty significant. And so there's, I'll let you speak for yourself, but there's definitely an incentive for you to get this project moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ashley, there's a couple things. One, we've made significant investments in several buildings on Main Street. So it's not just a hotel play for us. It's a hospitality play. We're roughly $1 million into the building already. We have $1 million in interest in reserves to trigger the loan. We have a 6-month extension on the USDA financing. And so that means that it's really, and we're 2 years into the project. And so asbestos is out. And so there's a lot of incentive for us to get this thing moving prior to June. And so with respect to the question, this isn't a project that's going to sit around on the books and be completed 4 years from now. It's either going to start and go quickly by June, or it won't start at all. And that's kind of where we are.
One more question, follow-up question, Stan. But with that said, your project is in the 3 phases, though. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the 3 phases is only the 3 phases is only it's a 24-month span, has to cover three phases, so that or 3 calendar years, which is, it's kind of a trick of math. We start in June, finish phase 1 by October, get a certificate, start in November, finish mid-June, then start in mid-June and finish the following January. And that's just because part of this project is maxing the state historic tax credits, and they have $1 million cap per year. And so it won't appear like it's actually starting and stopping, and it's just periods of like significant completions where we have to have the architect submit paperwork so we can say this phase is done, so that we can capture that, and then the next year this phase is done. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Okay, I'll get to you, Frank, just a second. I had a couple things that I want to throw out there real quick, probably for Stan. Well, anybody. We're all elected officials, and our first allegiance is to our taxpayers and our citizens. Worst case scenario, this whole thing bellies up, and I'm saying it's not going to do that, but if it worst case scenario, what's the citizens of Canyon City out? What's the worst thing that could happen? How much money taxpayer money would they be out?
The way that tax increment financing works, it's only if you generate tax increment does the incentive work. In other words, if nothing happens, if the project does not go anywhere, there will be no impact on the taxpayers, because that tax revenue it was never generated to begin with. So that's the beauty of tax increment financing, particularly in redevelopment areas. The tax, whatever the tax is from that property today, will just continue to go to the tax.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the other thing I had was you're estimating $8.8 million on this. If the assessor comes back and says it's worth $3 million, so now you're 400,000 in 5 years. That's almost out to 12 years, and you might be the whole 25 years to get back to 1.2 million. And that's so you're. I guess not a question, but just my comment would be, if it's all up to the assessor, whatever she's going to value this thing at. If it comes back to 3 million, 4 million, whatever the case may be, that's what it is, and all of us in this room will just have to deal with it.
Yeah, we are actually working on 2 other projects where we're interfacing on behalf of urban renewal authorities with the county assessors. And I think our feeling all along, and we've been doing this for a long, long time, is that the assessors have to be brought into the process early, and sharing information with them, particularly from the applicant standpoint. We've been able to set up meetings between the developer and the county assessor and their staff, and say, this is what we're doing. This is the value that we're adding. This is the construction value. This is the projected market value. And in most cases, at least there's an understanding that, this is an unusual project in a redevelopment area that probably can't be valued the same as you would a project out on the fringe of your community. And we've had pretty good success with the assessors, at least understanding the uniqueness of these projects.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so it really,
Tim, can I add to that?
it comes down to the assessor and how they ultimately value that property.
Okay. Stan, did you?
Tim, you should also know that part of the USDA loan is we had to come up with, we had to hire a private assessor to come up with an as-built assessment. And it came back at 8.8 million. And so we have that available. And then also a lot of those assessments are based on a factor against, construction costs. And so we feel really good that 8.8 million is a real number, because it's sort of now it's cross-referenced 3 different ways, right?
Okay, thanks, Stan. Frank, do you have something?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on Mr. Meisner and also on you, Mr. Payne. The first part, this is I'm the one gentleman at the beginning when this came about that, in a sense, opposed the urban renewal program. And one of the reasons I opposed it at that time was because, like Mr. Meisner said, we had a lot of people coming in here with big plans. We're going to do this. We're going to make everything great. You're going to see development grow. You're going to see all this grow. And no money. Because none of all those big ideas and big plans ever materialized. Now, you folks, when you got the place, you had a lot of good ideas and things like that that's going to happen and everything else. Yes, I know you've done some work on the place, but the work that you've done, in a sense, people can't see and everything else because it's in the inside. If people go by, and they'll say that, it hasn't really changed. Oh yeah, there's a lot of nice paper on the windows and all this other stuff to look at, but it hasn't changed. So we don't know what's going on there. I look at the project, and I'm saying that there's really nothing wrong with the project, but I look at some things that can also make the project even more difficult when you look at it. And the biggest thing to me is, folks, it's parking. You're talking about 2 bars with outside seating, all right? If we put 2 bars with outside seating, it's going to take away from some of the sidewalks, which we would have to expand. And if you expand those, you're going to lose parking spaces on those streets because they're too narrow to begin with. And I haven't heard of anything that tells me that you folks have acquired enough area to take care of the parking space that you'll need to make that hotel successful, to make that restaurant successful and everything else. And that's where I'm coming from. That, to me, if anything will drop this project for you, it's going to be that in Kansas City. And I haven't heard anything that's going to tell me how you're going to come around to solve that problem.
Sure. Can I just add some flavor to that? The parking is an issue, you're right. Originally, when we bought the hotel, Aaron was going to give us the lot that is right behind it's now for sale. And when that sort of went sideways, we began to work with John Paul Airy. And so we've leased 701, the Standard Oil building, and we also own 709, the building next to that. And the agreement is with John Paul that when the hotel gets going, we'll take down the little insurance building behind the Standard Oil building, and we'll have room for 27 parking spaces there. Three Rock Engineering has already designed it, and so it's kind of a quantified thing that we know. I've also talked with Preston, Mr. Former Mayor Troutman, on maybe leasing some of the space at his space, which is just a block up the street. But the best option is the Standard Oil building, and we feel pretty comfortable that's locked. And obviously, we don't want to open up a hotel without parking, and so we feel pretty good. On the inside, I think that I share the same sentiment with you. It's taken a long time to not do a lot of visible things. But there are evidences of our other work, like the post office building and the Apex building and the Annex building, where we're making modifications and we're doing renovations and we're upgrading those buildings. the Hotel St. Cloud because of the financial performance. I mean, when you go in and you realize it's going to cost you 11.4 million to remodel a building that's going to be worth 8.8, that's hard math to get investors to buy in and to also make work. And so the work that we've done is just stuff that we knew we had to do to kind of speed the project up once we got through this. But I think I share the same sentiment. It's still a rough building on the corner of 7th and Main, and you know, we need to get moving, right?
Okay, thank you, Stan. Commissioner Denny.
Hi, Stan. This is Tim Dennehy.
Hey, Tim.
I'm gonna follow up with Frank. You know, one thing we say that about parking and, but we do have businesses downtown that'll put 60, 70 people in their building at once, and they don't have a parking lot either. And I think that with Stan saying that, what he's looking at is he's definitely trying to expand it out. I can say this, I've had the honor of going to a couple other buildings that Stan has done up in Denver, and they're fantastic buildings. I haven't seen the other ones that he's done on the East Coast. Hope someday to see those. But I think this is, just from what I've seen, what Unbridled can do. I think this project is 100% fantastic for Canyon City.
Okay, John?
Sure, thank you. Yes, did you want to say something, Stan?
Yeah, I was just going to say the phase 1 plan, which, all going well, should start in spring to June. Phase 1, it starts with the outside. So it starts with the bar and it starts with the exterior. So that's new windows, new facades, the storefronts, and all of that. So I just want to go back to say we're aware, like we need to see something on the exterior to see that it's actually going to materialize.
Okay, thanks, Dan. John?
Thank you, Chairman Payne. So, but to follow up on your question, what is the risk for taxpayers? It's not zero, because we've hired a consultant. And if there were never any URA projects, we're going to be out that money. There's probably attorney's fees that have gone. Looking at the overall scheme of things, though, that's not very much to risk. We're not talking a lot of dollars for a pretty good return. So that it's not zero. At least that's the way I look at it. It's not zero, but in terms of potential, it's really more on the trivial side.
Okay, Mr. Tomar?
Yeah, I also wanted to jump back on Mr. Cunningham's proposal, or the agreement considerations about the performance requirements. And that's just for this project, but just for the URA in general for future projects to remember. These agreements are helpful in acquiring the developers to acquire financing, things like this. So there are some teeth to these. And so the performance requirements are not, not something that we should just lightly take on, because basically we don't want a project to start something and they use our agreements to get their funding and then turn around and take years to finish it. That doesn't help what we want. We want development. This is what this program is for. So I can see where we need to really pay attention to these performance agreements or requirements, mainly because that's what we are supposed to be doing here. We're supposed to be promoting this. So we don't want these projects dragging out just to get a developer an avenue to acquire investors and financing. So it's a two-way street. They want to make money. We want the projects done as fast as possible. So I can understand that that's something we should definitely pay attention to on these requirements. So I don't want anybody to kind of just let those float by, because there is some teeth to that, these agreements with URAs help to get the funding to do these projects. So we should obviously want those projects to serve our needs as well on that.
Okay. Stan, do you have anything on that? So I'm not cutting.
No, I think that it's 24 months from the day we break ground. So and there's a $1 million into the building out of pocket already. So I'm just as incentivized as anybody else to get the thing moving.
And Stan, that wasn't an attack on you. That's just in general.
Yeah, I
for the
know.
Future, yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know. I think it's,
Great job.
the dialogue is really smart. So I think it's wise to be talking like this.
Okay, Commissioner Reeser, you have something?
First of all, I have a plug for Stan's ability to make beautiful things happen. If you haven't been in the post office / art center and seen the transformation, you should go. It'll take your breath away. It's phenomenal. And then I just have a clarification comment. I believe that URAs are for blight remedies, not economic development. The state statute is for blight remediation. The economic development is a kind of a side benefit. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody remembers that it's for blight, and St. Cloud's definitely fits into that category.
Yeah.
Okay. Madam Mayor.
And I will repeat that the work that has been done so far has been excellent. That's exactly the kind of investment we want to see happening in Canyon City's future. And it is a huge blight downtown, and it is dragging down downtown's potential. And it's actually, I would say it's a risk for us not to see this project come to fruition, because it will change downtown, not just the Hotel St. Cloud, but that entire area. And even with just the hotel, after the first 10 years payback, we're talking $3.1 million of added revenue that can be invested back into our streets, into our stormwater, into all of our other projects for our city. So it's a risk not to see this come through. And as I said, it's a cornerstone. And I think that this is, Unbridled has demonstrated that they're the ideal partner to launch our first URA project, and that this is the best use of our brand new tool, the URA, for this economic development project and our future ones that are coming down.
Anybody else have anything? Mr. Meisner?
Just quickly, and I think it's a correction, but the $3.1 million is only realized at the 10-year mark.
After the 10-year mark.
After the 10-year mark. That's an accumulative figure at that point.
But with the share backs, though, these entities will be seeing it immediately. Well, as soon as.
Assuming the
hotels are
8.8 million.
Right.
Also.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then on the negative side, if this project didn't go through and flopped, there's a massive problem with that building on the corner and being recognized as a historical building that the city has already tried to address in the past. It's going to sit there for a long time.
Okay. Anybody got anything else? John?
Sure. Yeah. On page 13, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the numbers correctly and understanding what you've done for us. That's the economic development summary. So if we look at the first 5 years for sales tax increment for the hotel lodging, that's 91.7 is what we've got there. Okay, so if we assume our sales tax rate is 8%, and you divide that up by the 5 years, that means that you've got that there's needs to be revenue of about $230,000 per year, which if you're talking 36 rooms and you divide that out, say it's $100 per room, that means that you're looking at only 64 days rental per year per room to generate that 91,000 over the 5 years. Is that, did I do that? Did I go through that the right way?
I'm not sure all of.
No.
Yeah. I think that was a great attempt at looking at it that way.
You're doing it based on an assumption of 8%. This is only the 2% city tax that's eligible for as increment.
Okay, so that's a multiplication of 4. So that means 264, well, 4 times 64 is about 240 days per year out of 365. So that's just a way to look at the numbers. That's all I'm doing.
It'd be more
Yeah.
than the 2% though. Would be the 2% plus the lodging, right?
No, the
No.
lodging tax is not part of the increment. That is only the increment that is additional sales tax that is generated as increments. So that would, it is only calculated on the city's normal 2% sales tax.
Okay.
It does not include the road, the 2A sales tax.
Okay, anybody have anything else?
Well, I have a question on what the next steps are from here.
So for us, we're working on the negotiation with Unbridled on the contract. Stan does have that contract in hand. He is reviewing it. We'll be working out those details. And then once we have completed those negotiations, we'll bring that contract back to the authority for approval.
Have we addressed the items that we're talking about in there with the agreement considerations? Is there anything that hasn't been addressed
Yeah, I believe we have all those items in the agreement.
in some form?
Yeah.
Mr. Stevens, do you have anything else for a report?
Yeah, the last thing I was going to do was those next steps, and
Okay.
so I'm good.
I got one final question
go
when we
ahead.
get back to the final one. When this comes back, is there any way we can have it done? I know he's mentioned he's talked to a lot of people with regards to the parking spot. But just like we do stuff when we give certain changes of ordinance for people that want to buy something and do something, can we make it that he has a written commitment from these people? If the project goes through, those properties that he wants to obtain for parking are in that agreement.
Yeah, and I believe he already has those written agreements.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, can we, when we have this back, can we see them, a copy of that?
We are-
I'd like to see that. So I can go and say that you brought something that said, when this project, if it's approved, these places that I talked about are going to be mine. You know, not just talking that they will let you have them. I'd like to see something that actually says they will be mine. And I don't question his ability to do stuff. You're talking about the post office. So that's not my question. I think he can do a good job, but the thing about it is this. We want it to succeed. And I don't care what anybody says, this project would not succeed if you don't have adequate parking for the restaurants to keep going, for the hotel rooms to keep going, and everything else that this project can bring. That's the important part.
Commissioner Reeser?
So,
Mr. Bullis, may I interrupt real quick? Don't you
yeah.
have some additional parking behind the post office that's available?
yeah, I mean, we've got parking at the post office. We have parking at 709, probably 10 spaces there. We're already leasing the 709 building. So we're already under a lease for that space. And so I think that most of that, I think that if there was more flavor to put towards John Paul's building, the Standard Oil building, is something that I have to do in the normal course anyways. I don't have it in writing that he's gonna take down that building, but I have it on a handshake deal, and we're already leasing the property with him, and so I think that your point's noted, and we'll try to firm that up a little more for you. I also, just as a sidebar, I mean, our offices are downtown Denver, and I think that the demand will open up parking, and so even if it's like Preston's building, the parking sort of follows demand. We're like, if we can create the 30 spaces across the street and create a successful hotel, we'll find parking. The Presbyterian Church has that 33 spaces just another block down. There's space behind the building. There's the city building. And so, but I understand what you're saying, that the parking is really important.
Okay. Ashley?
Just a quick comment too. As far as John Paul area goes, he owns a number of buildings downtown as well that he leases or really wants to be able to lease. And so he also recognizes that the success of this Hotel St. Cloud, it equals his success too. And so he has a special interest in making sure that that does go well.
Okay, anybody have anything else? Okay, Ryan, you have nothing else? All right, Stan, do you have any further comments to make?
No, I just want you guys to know we really appreciate you and just sticking in with us, and we're hopeful to get this hotel open. I would say that in terms of revenue, you're not going to have to wait 2 years before revenue starts up, because each one of those phases we have to open up retail locations. So phase one, that should be done by middle to end of 2021, we'll have to have the bar open. So you're going to get revenue from that. Phase two, which would be following June-ish, will be the rest of the lobby and the steakhouse and the other bars. So you're going to get tax revenue from that. And then phase three will open up in January of 2023, and that will be the hotel portion. And so you're going to see revenue incrementally faster than the spreadsheets have shown.
Okay, so following up on Madam Mayor's comments, our next steps will be waiting for an agreement to review.
Mhm.
That is correct.
All right. Okay, anybody have anything else?
No, you can
Okay.
keep those.
You want the folders though, is that right? For next time, okay. All right, myself and Mr. Tomar will switch spots next month. They'll drop off, and Mr. Grantham, Commissioner-elect right now, will be coming on board. Okay, with no further business coming before this Urban Renewal Authority, we are adjourned.